Good morning, and welcome back to day 2 of the 2021 Creating Energy Northern Resources Conference, hosted by our presenting sponsor, Tourmaline. We're honored to be coming to you from the lands of the Denezaw people. My name is Cheryl Montgomery, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fort St. John and District Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is so thrilled with the response to grow this annual event and with the help of all of our sponsors and speakers who are participating this week. Yesterday, we had a day filled with what Stuart Meir called brain power, the top leaders in the oil and gas sector discussing the path forward for us nationally and globally. Today, we're going to be bringing it back a little bit closer to home and talking about some issues that really affect us all here in the Northeast region. What's happening right here in our backyards. We will hear what innovations are happening and how they're game changers in the global scene. Listen in on a panel that will discuss the really critical communication components to helping businesses start those important conversations that benefit everyone. Then this afternoon, we will have some conversations with the mayors of the region and some of our local industry representatives who will share with us their visions for the next few years and how they'll impact our community and our economy. It should be another great day of dialogue shaping up ahead of us. So to kickstart things today, please welcome Mayor Lori Ackerman to introduce our keynote speaker.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege to be here this morning to introduce Sharleen Gale. And I want to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today together to learn on the traditional territory of the Denezaw people. And I want to express my gratitude for the work that they have done over the years to be stewards of this land. Sharleen Gale is the granddaughter of Fred Burke and Madeline Needley. So her roots run very deep in the lives of her people and her community. She enjoys being on the land and showing her son the traditional ways of the lands and how to hunt and how to fish and how to gather the medicines and the berries that are traditional to the community. She is an active member of the Fort Nelson First Nations and envisions a future where all members work together. And naturally, Sharleen has been and is the chief of the Fort Nelson First Nations. Sharleen has worked in the oil and gas sector since 2000, and her various roles have given her extensive experience, and she's able to combine that experience with her vision to ensure that the lands and the resources are managed to benefit her community. Due to those various public offices for her nation, she understands the importance of upholding the spirit and the intent of the treaty by asserting her people's rights on their land and taking responsibility for ensuring that their future generations are able to live their lives in their territory in a way that honors their ancestors. And just on a personal note, I see her as a strategic thinker. She understands before she acts, and it's that strength of knowledge and experience, not only through her own experiences, but the wisdom of the elders in the community that really drive her on a daily basis, along with that deep love of the land and its connection to her people. So please join me in welcoming Sharleen Gale.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be here. And I just wanted to thank you, Mayor Ackerman, for that kind introduction. It's my pleasure to be here with you all today. And although I look forward to being in person and meeting you guys face to face, which has been very challenging in the past while, doing things remotely, doing things at home, through Zoom. It's just a little different these days. So I just can't wait till we can all be together and really talk about the challenges and find solutions in the coming days when the health orders and those kind of things lift. So I know that this pandemic has taken a toll on our communities and also on our most vulnerable. So I also think that the business community and the resource sector have a huge role in getting us back on track. So I'm very happy to be here today and to see this conference go ahead with so many great speakers. So today I've been invited here to speak with you in two capacities. The first is as the chief of the Fort Nelson First Nation. Fort Nelson is a Dene Cree community about 4 hours north of Fort St. John. Some of you may have been there. We have a very beautiful, beautiful landscape, the Serengeti of the North. So yeah, more than welcome to join us. We have a lot of beautiful provincial parks here in our territory, and we're always willing to share our culture and our language and our identity with the newcomers and people that would like to come visit us. So welcome. We are also a small nation, but we do have big plans. And today I'll share a little bit about the Clark Lake geothermal plant in particular. The other hat that I'm wearing today is the chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition. And we are a national organization representing over 70 First Nations. Although our membership is concentrated in BC, we have been expanding our membership in the territories and every province east through to Ontario. The coalition's main goal is to enhance our economic well-being of our members by providing services and tools designed to support our members in making informed business decisions in major resources and infrastructure projects. And I'll share with you some of the progress we have been making over the past year. So let's get started. I'm very excited to tell you about the Clark Lake geothermal project. This is our $91 million 7 to 15 megawatt geothermal electricity generation plant that will provide energy equivalent to about 14,000 households. And it is actually adjacent to our reserve, and it will supply clean, renewable baseload electricity to the BC grid. We officially announced it in March after securing a large federal government commitment, and the construction is expected to begin in 2024. I just have to say that a couple days ago, we brought our council, our board, and some industry players that are interested in purchasing some power off of us. It's pretty exciting to let you know that we'll be drilling our first well in next week on Aboriginal Day. And we'll be doing the opening ceremony and a groundbreaking just to thank the ancestors and to thank the land for what it has provided to us. We really, truly believe this is a gift from our ancestors. So we're going to kick off the project in a good way. And we just look forward to sharing as we move forward in the years of the development of the project. Daytai Limited Partnership is the economic development arm of the Fort Nelson First Nation, and they are currently managing it. And it is a 100% Indigenous-owned geothermal project by Fort Nelson First Nation. And I'd like to say the first of its kind in Canada. So we're excited about that. I think we got a lot to be proud of with that. So yeah. This project marks one more milestone for Fort Nelson's journey to assert our inherent right and build an economic base that will help us to be financially independent. I've championed this project with my council, with the board, and the community because I believe it will create good jobs and livelihoods for our people and provide opportunities for our youth so they don't have to leave our community to meet their full potential. There will be a lot of opportunities with this project. The economic impact will go beyond Fort Nelson. It's an opportunity for the entire Northern Rockies region. We estimate that there will be about 10,000 workdays for well field development and related services, and another 4,000 workdays for plant construction, including electricians, welders, pipe fitters, insulation fitters, and mechanics. A lot of these jobs are transferable from the oil and gas industry, so we definitely need the expertise and the help to make this successful. After that, there will be a significant plant maintenance and well field maintenance contracts. So this will be a big local job creator, and we're proud to have attracted that kind of investment in our region. I think that it will really provide food security for the North. Obviously, we know that we have a lot of challenges as you live more north. So we're happy to be able to make people's lives a little bit easier with this project. I want to talk about how this project, the geothermal energy, is actually building on our region's expertise in gas. As a former gas plant worker myself, I've been at the Fort Nelson gas plant for the last 20 years. I'm currently on a leave to lead my community in the role as chief. So with that and coming from, you know, that kind of experience, I'm excited that we are repurposing a depleted gas field for economic opportunities. The people, the equipment, and the experience we already have in our regions, making us competitive in geothermal, and we can leverage our existing infrastructure as well. The Clark Lake plant will be constructed using the roads, well pads, and the right-of-ways left by the gas industry. And it's a way for us to lead the energy transition rather than being left behind. This doesn't mean that gas doesn't have a role to play in our lives or in the future, but that we can get even more value from this sector in a more environmentally and responsible way. Having clean energy sources of power locally is not just good for the environment, it's good for the bottom line for companies that need to show their investors their own carbon footprint. Low carbon ventures have been able to get better access to capital and can appeal to larger markets. I believe this project has the potential to act as a catalyst for Fort Nelson's economy and for the entire Northern Rockies region. It's the first of its kind in BC, and it can help position us to be a geothermal energy hub in the future. I always have this vision that we're going to have this smart city or something, or a smart town, but the possibilities are endless, and I'm always a visionary and I'm very optimistic. So I like to think that way and dream big. So just wanted to share that thought with you. The Fort Nelson's other big project is a biomass adventure in partnership with Peak Renewables, a bioenergy company. It involves a 600,000 ton per year wood pellet plant in Fort Nelson, with the pellets being derived from forest residue. It also includes Fort Nelson First Nations forestry business. We are partners with the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality in the largest community forest license ever awarded in BC, as well as developing our own Fort Nelson First Nation forest tenures. So we've been working really hard to create opportunities for our people and the people that are living in our territory while using our natural assets to produce clean energy. I have to say that I'm very proud of our partnership with the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality, because it's important that we come together in unity and we find ways to overcome our challenges so that everyone can prosper that's living in the territory. I have to say that Mayor Gary Foster and his council have been so refreshing to work with. They're just open to finding solutions and moving us forward on a path of prosperity through collaboration and just trust and just a true partnership. So I just commend their council and Mayor Gary Foster for all the work they're doing, including their administration. Equity ownership of major projects is a key priority for our coalition members and all of its projects that have opportunities attached to them. Currently, we're supporting our members in 5 major projects representing a total combined capital cost of over $7 billion. So our nations and our members, we have big ambitions. We want to be a part of the natural resources that are in our territories, but also into the major projects that are involved. So we want to be involved. We want to see our people being successful, having good jobs, providing for their families. We want the same things that you want for your families and for your communities. We see equity ownership as the next step in Indigenous engagement in resource projects. And that evolution is happening fast. Just last week, there was an announcement about the Cedar LNG with Pembina coming on as a partner with Haisla Nation. And it's really exciting to see that project move ahead in that manner. So I'm just excited for them. I think that we have a lot to learn from that partnership, and we'll see what happens as the days move forward, but just wishing them success. And I think that this is the new way of doing business with First Nations. So let's keep an eye on that. I think you're going to see that when Indigenous communities come on as equity owners, there's a higher investors' confidence, smoother regulatory processes, and a more bus-row environmental standards, and ultimately more social license. Most Indigenous people I know, and of course there are different views on this, but most of us are in favor of resource development when our communities benefit and when it's done responsibly, and when we're involved on making decisions on how projects will be laid out on our landscape and in our territories. We need to be empowered to become full partners in the development that takes place in our territories for that to happen. That includes having the time and the capacity to conduct our own due diligence on projects so that we can fully understand the risk and benefits and share that information with our members and our neighbors. That capacity will allow us to feel confident in our ability to provide solid recommendations. And if a project is a good one, to attain our members' informed consent. The more resources we have as nations, the more efficiently and effectively we'll be able to conduct our own assessments on projects and avoid unrest or legal actions or delays. That is the last thing that us as a nation want to do, is spend our own source revenue on fighting against projects when we could have just sat there and met at day one without industry coming with preconceived plans. I think it's important, if you want to develop in a First Nations territory, just come talk to us. Sometimes there might be challenges, or you don't know how to approach a nation, but as the chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, I'm here to help, I'm here to assist. If I can introduce you to a nation, I will do that. I think it's a good way to start off a project, is just to meet with the nation and to get their feedback and develop those plans with them. But we also need to have access to competitive capital so we can maximize the financial returns of our participation in these projects. Access to capital is such a challenge for our economic development, and I want to give you one example. We conducted a market sounding on behalf of our members who were trying to get equity on a natural gas pipeline. I'm sure you can guess which one, but there has been little interest from investors, and those. The best interest rate offers were between 12 and 15%, and the return for investment for the asset was estimated between 8 and 10. A really good project, but we couldn't get competitive rates. In the end, our members lost out on an estimated $200 million in benefits to our communities over the project life cycle. And that kind of money could have had a real impact on our communities. So it's frustrating to see, but that's one of the challenges that really needs to be focused on. So we're focused on that challenge as a coalition, and we want to prevent it from happening again when other opportunities come up for our members. One of the things we've been working on, and I want to tell you about, is the work that Mark Podolsky has been doing. Some of you may know him and his efforts on this. He's making here Indigenous inclusion is factored in ESG, our environmental, social, and governance ratings. For the few of you here not tied to the investment world, ESG ratings are a way for investors to direct more money into projects and ventures that meet ethical rather than purely profit-driven goals. Environmental includes things like carbon intensity of a project. Social includes things like how companies manage relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and the communities where they operate in our Indigenous communities. And governance covers the internal governance of the company. This may include things like company's leadership, executive pay, audits, internal controls, board of directors and shareholder rights. It's not a niche market. It's a big part of investment attraction right now, and it's only going to grow. In fact, the shares of investors with at least 25% ESG investments jumped from 48% in 2017 to 75% in 2019, and 90% of the companies in the E&S 500 index issued sustainability reports last year. If you heard about the Oil Sands Alliance commitment last week, for an example, to be a net zero by 2050, that's driven by business considerations. Investors want to see that holistic value in projects and mitigate their regulatory and political risk. And there's capital available to those that do that and can do that. But what we have seen is that the environmental side of ESG ratings, really the carbon intensity, has gotten most of the attention. So we're working to make Indigenous impacts and so that we can benefit and be a priority for investors too, making sure that the I is in ESG. We issued a report earlier this month on this. If you're interested in learning more, as well as a roadmap for attracting more investment in Canada through Indigenous engagement, I'll just summarize some of the highlights for you. Provide more Indigenous investment capital. This could be facilitated with an Indigenous infrastructure bank, for an example, through federal loan guarantees for Indigenous equity purchases into major projects that are happening within territories. Make sure projects fit with Indigenous nations' existing goals and values, including early and meaningful engagement. Improve capacity support of Indigenous communities to bolster Indigenous planning, financing, and legal advice. This would help improve timelines and build up Indigenous support for projects internally, and increase Indigenous representation at corporate levels, including more representation of Indigenous women. I hope that you can see that these recommendations as an opportunity and not as a burden. But if more and more investors look to direct their capital into projects that have Indigenous ownership, that's going to be a boom for this region and for Canada's resource sector. So that is a competitive advantage. I'm working hard to make sure that First Nations get every chance to benefit from new projects and investments, and that we provide leadership in how the region's economy evolves, but in a way that envisions this, that creates opportunity for everyone in the region. This isn't about us and them and winners and losers. This is about making things better for everyone. I really do believe that we need to focus on Indigenous prosperity through unity. We need to be able to build up our communities and have opportunities. And as I said earlier, we want the same thing for our communities that you want for yours. We want the same thing for our families that you want for your family. And that's one of the last things that I want to touch base with you today. One of the themes of this conference is relationships. At the end of the day, there isn't a Fort Nelson economy and a Fort St. John economy and a Blueberry River economy and a Dawson Creek economy or a Fort Nelson First Nation economy. There is a regional economy, and we're all tied to it. And it depends heavily on the responsible development of natural resources. How are we going to work together? How are we going to come together to overcome challenges and find solutions? Prosperity through unity, which includes Indigenous component of that. And instead of competing over crumbs, we need to focus on growing the pie. We need to do that together. We have the people, we have the resources to make that happen, but we need to work together to make sure it does. Sometimes it's tempting to go it alone, to not have to consult and negotiate and to consider other perspectives and interests. Often you can go faster alone, but you can't go very far alone. I think of all of us in this room know that we need to work together. We need to build relationships and partnerships to succeed. And to go further, no one else is going to do that work for us. So what is holding us back? That is the question I ask you today. What is holding us back? First, I want to acknowledge what's working. There has been a huge change in our region and in our nation in the past decade in regards to building First Nations and municipality relations. I know there has been a lot of reflection and learning and outreach. And I want to acknowledge you, Mayor Ackerman, for the work you have done towards reconciliation. I can see that you're making that effort, and I really appreciate all the work you're doing, all the outreach you're doing, how you're bringing people together. I believe that's so important, and I really admire the work that you're doing. And just thank you for allowing me to be here just to share my perspective on how we can move forward and just sharing some of the projects that we're working on. I think it's important that we all share our stories. We all have successes that we need to share, and we need to support each other. But if we're all honest with each other, I think we can acknowledge that for a lot of businesses and for a lot of leaders, it actually took court decisions and regulatory mandates for our people to really consider engaging our First Nations in the opportunities around here, in our own territories. Indigenous inclusion has gone from a nice to do to a need to do, and that's a big step. But now I'm asking you to make it a want to do. I mentioned that First Nations are not opposed to development. We are not opposed to be lefting out. We can't accept that anymore. We must be moving alongside with you. We must be making these decisions with you for the betterment of our territories, our landscapes, and our future generations. And that means that we won't be treated as obstacles to be overcome or just another box to be checked. And we won't be an afterthought in the years coming forward with the development plans. We ask and we expect to be treated as partners for projects and initiatives that take place in our territory. And I see that many of the people and the corporations in this conference are working towards this. And it is very, very hard work. I've been at it for 13 years. I've seen a lot of change over time. And I think that we are just getting over that hump. And I see success. I see it, and I'm reaching for it. I just want those opportunities for my members, for my youth. I just want to see it for the neighboring nations. I want to see municipalities come together. I want to see business partnerships with our communities. I just want to see us all successful. I appreciate that partnership is a two-way street. The hard work isn't just for you. As for leaders of my First Nation, I promise I will show you the same respect that you show me. I will try to bring solutions to the challenges we face together. And I will do that because I believe in my heart that having good relationships with our neighbors and with the business sector is the best interest of the people of the Fort Nelson First Nation. And to move forward, we must be able to acknowledge and remember the promises of treaty that have been made and must be kept. It's a hard truth to acknowledge at times, but the reality is that the promise of treaties are what opened up our land to be shared with the settlers and for the settlers to prosper in our lands. This is true in my territory here, and this is also true in Fort St. John as well. We all know those promises have not yet been fulfilled. So when you think about things like the promise of land parcels coming as a part of treaty land entitlement, please think generously about this and remember that you are only here because of those promises that were made through treaty. Talk to your neighbors who have forgotten about this, who are opposing the land transfers. Ask them to remember that they are treaty people too, because I can tell you the Indigenous communities surrounding Fort St. John and Fort Nelson definitely do. I don't expect that we'll agree 100%, but we all need to agree to be role models of and be willing to try to understand each other and to accommodate each other where we can and to respect our differences when we can't. And when we do the work to find the middle ground, that's what it means to have a relationship. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today. I think it's a step in the right direction for us to hear from and to learn from each other. not just about the business side of things, but about how resource development affects communities and the land and jobs. And for us to commit to one another that we'll just do our part to make sure that the projects we enter in to involve everyone who is affected. I'm up next after our coffee break with a really great co-panelists where we'll be able to get into more of discussion on prosperity and inclusion and how our relationship with one another matters. And I look forward to that opportunity to have more engagement with all of you and answer some questions. So thank you, Masi Cho, and hi.
Thank you so much. What an inspiring talk you've just given us, and it reminds me how much we all have to learn about building these partnerships and building these relationships. You said something about you have a vision about a smart city. I think you're well on your way. I don't think anybody can say that you guys aren't operating a smart city in Port Nelson, and certainly with your First Nations there. So you're definitely leading the way, Sharleen, and a lot of people have aspire to be doing, I think, what you're doing. We were going to look for some questions within the Q&A. I don't see any there, but I did want to just talk for a second about, your project coming up. You did mention, the next 4 years are going to be moving into a building capacity with the geothermal project. What an exciting time you guys have ahead of you. And, it makes me wonder, how will you fill that many jobs? Is Fort Nelson that big?
It's a good question. So, it's been really challenging for our communities. We've had a economic downfall for the last 12 years with the forestry industry going first, and then, all the workers transferring over to oil and gas boom. And then the oil and gas markets crashing. So that had been really challenging on us for the last 12 years. We've had a lot of families move from Fort Nelson. And, that's the last thing that we want to happen. We want people to raise their families alongside our communities and just be involved in what's happening. It's been really challenging. So we welcome people to be a part of our territory, to be a part of our communities. Fort Nelson First Nation holds many events, and we always invite anybody that is traveling by, whether it's on the Alaska Highway or through the local municipality. And we're one of the top employers in Fort Nelson. So we have a very diverse employment and staff, and also just people from all over the world work for us.
Yeah, you're definitely leading the way, and we all could learn a lot from that. I just want to make a note. Rudy in the chat has asked a question. He wants to acknowledge, very good presentation. What is the name of the report on Indigenous engagement with ESG that Chief Gale is referencing?
So it's if you look on our website, the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, when you get on there, it will say the Indigenous Sustainable Investment Discussing Opportunities in ESG. It was prepared by Mark Podolsky and presented in our conference, but it was released in January 2021. But it was also, we had a really good conference just to talk about this topic. So you can find it on our website and download the primer and the document.
Fantastic. One other thing you talked about certainly was equity ownership. And that came up a couple of times yesterday, not just ownership, but equity in terms of being at the table in all kinds of platforms, whether it's government, community, within your own organizations and nations, having that equity platform. And how do we change that? How do we start to build more equity in those public spaces and in those spaces of decision making and leadership? How do we build that equity for Indigenous peoples?
Well, one of the things that really does have to change is the policy. Indigenous people have been left behind for hundreds of years, since the economy started in Canada. We weren't able to do a lot of things. Things have changed in the past. So I think it's a lot of policy change. We need access to capital. And so you see other provinces offering equity for nations to get involved in the major projects in their provinces. And we need to see that in British Columbia. But we also have to have a willingness from the industry players, the major industry players, to entertain that and allow First Nations to be a part of that. They need to get out of their institutional thinking and think about this Indigenous in the ESG. That's where I think the everything is moving towards. And I think the more you can wrap your head around that, the more they're going to be successful in their projects, and they're going to bring First Nations along. When First Nations are able to build up their communities and provide jobs and employment to their members and to the locals that live around them, then, everyone does good. Because at the end of the day, where do we go spend our money? In the businesses in Fort St. John, in the businesses in Fort Nelson and the surrounding area. So I think when everyone's involved in prospering out of the economy, then we're all going to do good. But just having big companies, having the willingness to allow First Nations to be involved and have that conversation, there is a way forward through equity, through major projects.
Right. And I think that that's what our next session is going to be really discussing a lot further, is that, that ability to create those relationships, have the communication, build those partnerships, and not just build them so that you're ticking a box that meets a company criteria for, capital or whatever it might be, investment, but actually building some genuine, authentic relationships that are beneficial and, help build some type of sustainability particularly for the Indigenous future and generations to come, and building that type of a foundation and really working and being authentic.
It definitely is a clear line of consent, a clear form of consent when First Nations have equity in projects. But I think it's just really important for, the big corporations to overcome this challenge and to start thinking differently. I've had a lot of frustration in the past 10 years trying to negotiate and work with big corporations, and they don't get it. So incorporating the Indigenous and ESG is where it's at.
Okay, well, we're going to dig a little deeper in that on the next session. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to prepare for that, and everybody else can grab a coffee. As you can see in the chat, everybody is just, of course, blown away by everything you have to say. You're such an inspiration for everybody, Sharleen. And so we look forward to hearing what you have to say again in the next session. I'm going to just let everybody know, grab a coffee, and we will be back again shortly for the session on communication. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again, Sharleen.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you all. Masi.